32 minutes past the hour. It is indeed the Jeff Santos Show that you're tuned into. It is always great for our next guest. You know, Tuesday afternoons really should be Fridays on the Jeff Santos Show because it's a great way to sort of end the day, and maybe we'll have to move them to Fridays as well, and 2 days a week of the MTC Report. He's the Renaissance man. He's a great reporter. You can catch him in Daily Kos, of course, Democracy Watch News. So check him out on Twitter. He's always out there doing great stuff. And, of course, you catch him here every Tuesday on the Jeff Santos Show. The musician man as well as the reporter man, he is Mark Taylor-Canfield man. Mark, how are you?
Great, Jeff. As you know, it's been a really busy time in Seattle with the city council elections, a bunch of music events. We also have the 20th anniversary of the mass demonstrations that took place here in Seattle in 1999 against the World Trade Organization.
Oh, that's right.
So there are tons of events going on all week, including economist Joseph Stiglitz is going to be here. So I'm going to hope to interview him.
But please do.
But it's also
tell him I've been trying to get him for 4 years.
For Democracy Watch News, because I just officially today was reelected for another term as Democracy Watch News' executive director. So,
all right, way to go.
I want to thank all the staff and all the board who have been producing our podcast, the Democracy Cast, and then operating our international news feed. Thanks to coordinating editor Dean Edwards for that, and maintaining the website. Thanks, John Harvey, for that. Running the boards, Sally Garrett, and doing all the technical support. That's Steve Barnes. And I want to let people know that we, did an interview with you actually on our podcast called Democracy Cast, and it is available at Libsyn and Spotify and iTunes and all over the place. So if you want to hear sort of the inside story of what it's like to be in the media in the 21st century, tune in and you'll hear some personal anecdotes from Jeff Santos on Democracy Cast.
Oh yeah, we had a great time doing that. I tell you that it was a lot of fun. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about what I think is important in the fact that, and you reported this on Twitter earlier too, about that the candidate that ran against Ms. Sawant, who was basically funded by Bezos and company, now having second thoughts, and that to me is extremely important. I'm thinking that this could be a wake-up call for a lot of corporate Democrats, whether they're taking money from Bezos, and of course he also owns the Washington Post, as we know, whether you're taking money from the Bloombergs of the world who are entering now presidential politics, or the Bain Capitals, Deval Patrick's former employer, on and on and on. Hopefully people are waking up and saying, look, why am I basically being a pimp for these big, industrialists, these big corporate tycoons? And I think that's what you were saying earlier in your tweet and your text to me about Mr. Egan Orion, I think his name is, now publicly regretting this. Talk to me about that.
Yes, his name is Egan Orion, and he was the candidate that Amazon decided to get behind in order to try to defeat our Socialist Council member, Shama Sawant. He was, unfortunately for Amazon, and fortunately for the rest of us who live in Seattle, he was not able to do that. Mr. Orion did lose. It was a huge comeback. She came back from over 8 points down at the last minute and beat this guy who was given tons of money by Amazon and who now is telling people that he thinks it was a mistake and that he would have rather that Amazon didn't bankroll him. Partly because he said, it was completely unnecessary for him because they already had a great fundraising situation set up there. So he didn't think that they needed that money, which was actually filtered to his campaign through something called the Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce, which spent nearly $500,000 to support Orion and his campaign against the Shama Sawant, who is a self-admitted, proud socialist, democratic socialist, and is also the author of a lot of the city's $15 an hour minimum wage campaign, which has now gone on to a national movement.
We're talking with Mark Taylor-Canfield here on the Jeff Santos Show, and we also talked, I think last week, about Andrew Lewis getting his victory as well. The former Robert Rice's former student there. With Lewis and Sawant, There's the movement that Bernie Sanders really excited a lot of people in 2016. Is this now seemingly kind of coming into fruition?
Well, it does seem, Jeff, like we are witnessing the same kind of thing we see across the rest of the country, which is we see a very progressive move towards socialism and, helping, the poor working folks. But then we also have this backlash from the billionaires, and Seattle is a place where some of the richest people in the world live. Jeff Bezos is here, Bill Gates is here, Paul Allen was here, another Microsoft billionaire. So, what we see Amazon coming out of the woodwork here in an unprecedented way, dumping more money in the Seattle City Council elections than we've ever seen before. It's always been sort of a low-spent kind of publicly financed election here in Seattle for City Council. So this is the first time that big-name contributors have come along and piled, so much money, $500,000 behind one candidate. That's just unheard of. And Andrew Lewis, who happens to be former U.S. Secretary of Labor Robert Reich's former student, and Reich also endorsed him, he also came from behind to win. And I think both of them represent a backlash. And I guess, it was even Saul Alinsky used to say, whenever you push, there's, expect a backlash. Well, what came first, the chicken or the egg here? Was it the progressive movement that brought the billionaires out of the woodwork, or was it the billionaires and their, manipulations of the economy and politics that brought the working class candidates out of the woodwork? But in Seattle, at least two of them defeated their Amazon-backed candidates. And in general, Amazon was only to make any headway on two of these elections out of a council of 9 members, and 2 of them are still up yet to run for re-election. But it was pretty obvious to those of us who live here that it was an unsuccessful bid to control the city council. There was a big backlash towards the end of the election. A lot of people voted very late in this mail-in election because of that backlash, I think. And I think what Egan Orion is saying is that he would have done better if Amazon hadn't made him their poster boy, and that actually caused a lot of backlash against his campaign. So he's going to he's going to claim that he would have won if Amazon hadn't backed him. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it definitely didn't seem to help. She won a big election in a big comeback. She's considered a hero. She had a great party at Washington Hall on Saturday with some great music. A very talented local comedian, Brett Hamill, was there to poke fun at Amazon and Jeff Bezos, and they had some great music, supporting the rock music scene here in Seattle was supporting her as well. So it was a really amazing time and very historic time for Seattle. It's amazing to see this activism and these people really, taking responsibility for who we choose to represent our own community at a time when the corporate folks would love to just bankroll everybody with money that they support and kind of steamroll over the rest of us, is the way I look at that.
We're talking with Mark Taylor-Canfield here on the Jeff Santos Show. I'm also intrigued by how Bernie is surging in the West Coast. He was recently in California, got the endorsement of the University of Teachers, United Teachers of Los Angeles, one of the largest unions in the country, and I think the second largest in the state behind the NEA, or California Teachers Association, I believe, being the largest. The other part of that, of course, is that he also got the National Nurses United, also in California, based in Oakland. And I just think that the West Coast here, Seattle sort of is the epicenter, which you have just talked about. He's done very well in Oregon. There are a lot of rumors in 2016 that Jeff Merkley could have been the VP of the senator from Oregon. And, of course, California. A lot of people say the West is more progressive than the East Coast, and I would tend to agree with you, as being here in Massachusetts with a Republican governor. You report a lot. You spend a lot of time in Oregon, too. Would you say that, that is the case? Because that will also help Bernie in a place like Nevada, which is the third state, coming out of Iowa and New Hampshire. A lot of people say what happens in California politics happens a lot to Nevada. It's sort of like one sneezes and the other one says, God bless you, or Gesundheit. And I think there's something there.
Well, the unions definitely had a big influence on this city council election. United Here was a group of hospitality industry workers who got behind Andrew Lewis and really worked on his campaign. They were the major force behind his campaign. A lot of small businesses and unions support Kshama Sawant and her working class agenda. So, yeah, I think, it's definitely a Bernie-crat kind of an area. That's well known, and that doesn't seem to be changing. What's changed, Jeff, is that the billionaires seem to be coming out of the woodwork to address it. And I've never seen this before. Even all across the country, I've been watching this on major news networks where all these billionaires are suddenly talking to the media, coming out of nowhere. Bill Gates is, kind of hinting that he might support Trump because of Warren's wealth tax or whatever. But, I think it's a result of the fact that they are really, some of these billionaires are really afraid of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. I said at least 6 months ago that I expected Bezos and his minions and, billionaires like that to be talking with each other behind closed doors saying, how do we defeat this woman because she, is the anti-corporate candidate. She is the candidate that wants to tax the wealthy and go after the billionaires, and they just don't like that. So strangely that Bill Gates would come out of the woodwork. He normally gives to both sides from what I've seen to hedge his bets, but this time he's speaking publicly, and so are all these other billionaires. And all I can say is that they must see something. When you see people like this who don't really need to speak publicly because they can pull so many strings behind the scenes with their money, when they're coming out publicly and speaking out, somebody must be rattling their cages. And all I can say is it looks to me like it's got to be Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and their supporters all across the country, but especially on the West Coast where, yes, Nevada could be one of those states that goes for this new progressive kind of political movement. And if that happens, then, pretty much the West Coast, except for maybe Idaho, is pretty short up and on the progressive side. I really don't see much progress being made by the right wing here at this point. If anything, there's a big backlash against that sort of right wing politics that Trump has represented recently.
We are talking with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield here on the Jeff Santos Show. Another thing that you've done a great job in giving us some reports on what is happening in sort of the progressive movement around the world. I know you were tweeting out yesterday on the Hong Kong situation, which is atrocious, and we were talking about the human rights issues on the border, in Texas and so forth. That this administration is, just. I will say this, though, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Mark. I think that it is extremely important that coming out of these Trump impeachment hearings, which we carry live on the show today, some of the afternoon parts, that I just hope that the Democrats don't fall into this trap. We just talked to our good friend, and I know you're a big fan of Robert Craig. And, this idea that we would allow another corporate Democrat to win here. Barack Obama, who sold out on a number of issues after his first 2 years in office, in my opinion, is completely wrong. And the Democrats, particularly working class and middle class Democrats, do not listen to the former president. The Democratic Party simply in 2010 got demolished in the House. They never recovered until last November. They would have got demolished in the Senate, which they did in 2014. But it was a couple of people, including Delaware, told everybody she was a witch, which helped Mr. Coons, Biden's former chief of staff, hold on to the victory there. Otherwise, probably would have beaten him. I think that's really important because we cannot be bamboozled, to use Obama's term, into thinking that, that kind of progressive politics going back to Obama is going to go anywhere in this country. I mean, people brought in Trump because they felt that Obama had fooled them and lied to them, particularly on trade in the upper Midwest.
Yeah, Jeff, people want people to tell them the truth. They want to fess up to the problems that we're facing in this country. And if they can't do it, and if the Democrats are going to hide behind some middle-of-the-road corporate candidate, it does not bode well for them. So my thought is that, none of us on the progressive side of things here in this part of the country want to see another middle-of-the-road candidate from the Democrats. It's partly what split the party last time when you had all of these young people pouring all this enthusiasm and energy into the party, We were talking about this just the other day with some local activists here in Seattle, seeing all of this energy enter the Democratic Party and then seeing the Clinton faction of the party just sort of ignore them and at one point literally sort of ostracize and try to push them out of the party. That is a big mistake. Regardless of people's differences and points of view in terms of how to solve some of these problems, people have got to work together. And if you're going to have a party, I mean, look at what's happening to the Republican Party. It's destroying itself as we speak. I do not want to see that happen to the Democratic Party. It's already been split because of the animosity towards some of the Bernie supporters. People have got to get used to the idea that democratic socialism is getting more and more popular across the country. By the way, I interviewed Jason Call, who's running for the 2nd District in Washington State against Rick Larson, a longtime Democratic incumbent. And he's another one of those candidates like Sarah Smith in the last round of elections who's trying to challenge an incumbent who he thinks has been in the pockets of large corporations and defense contractors for far too long. And so Call is a former school teacher, and he's running for Congress on a democratic socialist platform. And he says, I am a Democrat, I am a member of the Democratic Party, but I am a democratic socialist. And that's something that the Democratic Party is going to have to get used to. I think the FDR crowd understood this. It was a very diverse tent. A lot of people were involved in those movements to bring us Social Security and the WPA and all of those. Yes, some might call socialist programs, but it really did bring the country out of the Depression. And those people who think of FDR as a very effective leader look back on those times as what the promise of the Democratic Party could be again if they would embrace these voices like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders. There are some voices out there that do represent the future, and if the Democrats want to be a part of the future, part of the future of the political process in the United States, they're going to have to jump on and understand their own constituents and their own base, which is moving more to a progressive way of looking at things. And they need to get on board and realize that and move the party with the constituents and where they're going so that they can adequately represent this new progressive movement in the country. If the Democrats would take advantage of it, they could I think they could get someone in the White House and they could get people elected to legislatures all across the country in cities, mayors, city councils. First, they need to embrace it and realize that this has been going on in Europe and other countries for years. Exactly. We need not be afraid of a move forward towards democratic socialism. People believe in democracy. They believe in doing what's right for the people. And this idea that we're going to have an oligarchy run by a few wealthy people and they're going to control the rest of us, that just doesn't wash with American values.
So we're talking with Mark Taylor-Canfield here on the Jeff Santos Show. And again, I bring this up what Michael Moore said when Bernie Sanders, when he asked Bernie Sanders 30 years ago in 1990, what is the definition of democratic socialism? He said it. You hinted at it. It's what the Democrats used to be. It was the FDR to Truman to JFK to LBJ in that 33-year window, 33 to 66. It was the escalation of Vietnam that destroyed the democratic New Deals and great societies. We spent all the money on wars in Vietnam. We lose the presidency in 68. And the Republicans have controlled the presidency since 68 for 31 years out of the 51. And the times that the Democrats did control the White House, the Republicans outside of the Carter years, ended up controlling the House and the Senate and under Clinton, and then eventually the House and the Senate under Obama. So, these guys didn't even have the opportunity because they tried to be cautious. They were concerned about 30-second commercials, concerned about outspending them. So they just basically went to Wall Street and said, we want the money too. And, as Harry Truman once said, there's only one Republican Party. You don't need two. Unfortunately, people like Clinton, Obama, and the rest of the Democrats who have run over the last 40 years didn't listen to that. I want to get to you before we have to roll on something that you shared on Twitter today. Uber CEO apologized for insensitive remarks about the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Saudi Arabia is Uber's fifth largest shareholder, and the head of Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund is on its board of directors. That's great stuff, Mark, as it usually is that you're on Twitter with, and I spend a lot of time just retweeting what Mark is doing because he's spot on. This to me is, and I don't know how important, how big Uber is in Seattle. I know it's huge where I used to live in Boston, now a few miles south of the city, and it's also huge in New York and D.C. and a lot of other big urban areas. And this to me is another reason why. And by the way, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Mr. David Plouffe, the former campaign manager for Barack Obama, is a senior advisor to Uber. I don't know if he left over the last year or so, but he was when it started. That goes to show you how these Democrats have sold out to these corporate entities. Your thoughts on Uber?
Well, that was on the Axio on HBO program. These statements were made, and Axio itself did print rebuttal, sort of, and in that I will only quote what they said themselves. Saudi Arabia is Uber's fifth largest shareholder, and the head of Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund is on its board of directors. And that's Axio itself admitting this after their program with the CEO. So, I mean, I'm editor for Press Freedom for Democracy Watch News, so I follow a lot of what Reporters Without Borders is research and indexing of press freedom around the world. I'm in touch with the Committee to Protect Journalists, the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, and all these groups that are doing great work on these issues. And well, he didn't say it was an okay thing. Let's be clear. He said that it was a mistake. Rather than calling it some kind of, like a human rights atrocity and a criminal act, he just said it was a mistake, like a self-driving car driving off the road. Now he's retracted that statement, realizes that it was very insensitive, but it leaves this impression in people's minds that it sort of goes back to what Trump has said in the past when confronted with Putin's, comments about journalists about we can't have that kind of talk. We already had, a newspaper outlet that suffered from violence last year. We had, the Boston Globe had a bomb threat called in after they called on all of the newspapers and magazines in the country to do editorials on press freedom. So this idea, whether it's in Saudi Arabia or Turkey, where they also do not treat journalists very well, or the United States, where we're ranked 48th in the world in terms of press freedom, this is just not appropriate to be referring to things like this as, the norm. And we've got to stop that. And I'm glad to see that there's been a pushback on it and that people are talking about it, because you can't let people get away with that. It does make me question Uber, which is very big in Seattle, but there are a lot of pushes on Facebook, I notice right now, to boycott Uber. So I think it's going to definitely cause a political backlash. Or not, it's not even politics, it's human rights. It's, what does your CEO represent when they're saying something like that? Where are your values as a company? And so, I think they're losing some share of the market here in Seattle, because they're all.
I like to see them. I personally like to see them shut down, because I think that they have destroyed the taxi service industry. But even more so than that, it is this sort of privatization element of our society. It takes away money from urban transit. In the MBTA under the Baker administration gives out a tax break. Might have been under Deval Patrick, too, a Democrat who sold out on this, too, to Uber to deliver people to schools, I think at Salem State up here just north of Boston. This, to me, is just outrageous. One of the things I'm wondering, because you see the music clubs, I've seen them, I used to live near one, the Ubers dropping off people at, really great rock clubs. I think they should stop it. I think there should be a protest. If you're going to get to a music club, walk, take the transit, whatever you have, bus, rail in your system. In Seattle, of course, I think you have both. There should be a way to do this without having to take Uber or Lyft. I just think that we need to get away from this, depending upon these car services. Again, privatization, it takes away from the whole of the community, and that to me is disgusting. So I want to start it. You can handle it, Mark. Start it in Seattle. No more Uber rides to the great concert halls, the Showbox, etc.
Well, I'll just mention that from the stage when I perform in a couple days here.
There you go.
Yeah, for those of you who showed up in Uber, I want to let you know something about that company, and then you make your own choice afterwards. But I think you'll make the right one and try something else next time.
Well,
subtle
exactly.
pressure from this stage doesn't hurt.
Why not? Why not? Mark, you're the best. We will talk to you next week. It is so fantastic having you as part of our Tuesday. We may have to make you a Friday thing, too, just twice a week with the MTC, man. All the best. Have a great rest of your week.
Hey, check out the MTC report at YouTube if you want to see some of my videos. We have over 400 videos there, and some of my music, too. So looking forward to talking to you again, Jeff. Have a great week. Always great to talk to you.
All the best to you, my friend. All right. I want to thank JR for producing this broadcast. Of course, appreciate, he's live here in studio next to me, folks. And I want to thank, of course, Tony Lopes, general manager here, and Mark Pacheco, the new owner of AM 1530 WVBF Taunton Middleborough, for the opportunity to do the program. We'll be back tomorrow, folks. Bob Cusack, Rona Free, John Nichols, all coming on. Until then, my name is Jeff Santos, and I gotta go.
You are listening to the voice of Southeastern Massachusetts for news, sports, and talk.
Elizabeth Fletcher, down, not quite as radical as Bernie, but radical by any standard in the Democratic Party, right? And any measure, aren't radical enough, and therefore she just fell out of the corporate debt. It's very important we not do that, and we understand that these individually, they are both the best candidates we've had in a long time in the Democratic Party, and in decades. I mean, really, I don't know. We could debate whether McGovern was, but you have to go for that far.
Yeah, no, you really do. You really do have to go back. McGovern, Eugene McCarthy, is a long way to go back. Talking to my good friend Robert Craig in New Jersey today here on the Jeff Santos Show. I will say this again. People know that I've been a Bernie supporter for the last 5 years or so, and been interviewing him since 2009. And I'm from Massachusetts, so obviously I like Elizabeth Warren. I think, though, and particularly in the places that Trump won, there's already a case of Bernie Sanders winning in Wisconsin big time, and to quote Mr. Trump, and of course he won in Michigan. And I also think, and I mentioned this to you before, that both Pennsylvania and Ohio, the other two states that you got to win to get that blue wall back, the Democrats going back to Bill Clinton in '92 would hold on to. Is the fact that Pennsylvania, and I've talked to a lot of people on the ground there, it's very, very difficult for a woman to win at the top of the ticket. Now, that may have changed in the last couple of years, in the Me Too movement and other things, but that's the history, and I don't think they've elected a Democratic governor or a Democratic senator who's been a female in Pennsylvania or Ohio in recent years. So that's another reason, too. If you are looking to make these decisions, both practical and in terms of, how many years Bernie has been doing this, those are reasons. But, there are good reasons for Elizabeth, too.
I just think it's going to come down to performance in primaries. You could have said a month ago that Elizabeth was running away with it, but that obviously was too early and not the case. I do think that Elizabeth is facing a gender penalty in the polls and the head-to-heads with Trump, but but Bernie folks should not use that. I mean, you'd ask yourself whether we should actually use it as a criterion for elected candidates. But I also don't think Elizabeth supporters should be saying that Bernie is unelectable because he doesn't look like any presidential candidate that's ever won a nomination, right? I think we got to stick on the issues, but we understand that half the party, the progressive half, has got to make sure that one of those two is the nominee, and it's okay to be divided between them now, but eventually everyone's going to have to make a choice, and it's going to depend upon how it plays out in these primaries. But we cannot have such infighting that we blow up both candidates.
We don't want to do that, because that'll leave us with a disaster. And again, and I want you to sort of verify this, because you get it in terms of what is happening to this country as we have moved for 40 years of Republican light, Clinton and Obama on trade issues that affected a lot of people people in your great state of Wisconsin and those other states that we just mentioned, to the fact that we don't have health care for everybody, the only industrialized country in the Western world that doesn't have that, the fact that we pay so much for education and people, in Europe in particular, you go to college for free. In some cases, I think Finland, they actually pay you to go to college. All of these things. And, you don't see, if it's not for Bernie and Elizabeth, nobody's talking about this. They're on the edge. Oh, you get Pell Grants from Buttigieg. Oh, you get Biden saying, oh, you can have health care and we'll give you something and, we'll put you on this program or whatever. And I think that is a big piece of the puzzle, too. Look at the facts. Since 1968, 31 years the Republicans have been in the White House, since Nixon. 31 years. That is the opposite of what happened with FDR through LBJ. That's what we need to get back to.
Yeah, and it's been a long time since they won the popular vote, 2004 notwithstanding, which is an unusual situation. But we can't have, as you and I've talked about many times, Jeff, we simply can't have a Democrat win this nomination, win the election on big promises or vague kind of statements that they're going to change things, and then not change them.
Exactly.
Because it is literally the decisions made at the beginning of the Great Recession, early in the Obama administration, I agree with Reed Hunt on this, who was an insider, literally is what set up both the Tea Party and set up Trump's victory. And it led to, people don't even know what their frustration was, other than they're frustrated about their lives and they're mad about the status quo and about business as usual, and they blame Democrats for it. And Hillary seemed like more of the same.
I don't know if we lost Robert there. Can you still hear me, Robert?
I'm still here.
Okay. I heard a little click there on the phone. I couldn't agree with you more. And think of this in the Obama early days. He appoints Rahm Emanuel, a corporate Democrat, chief of staff. Hillary Clinton, corporate Democrat to the Secretary of State. And Tim Geithner, what more can I say? So those are the first three choices. And that's what we ended up with. It was Republican light 101. And we can't have that again. And to me, there's only two candidates that can get the mandate going, win back the Senate, keep the House in 2022, and build a Roosevelt-type mandate that we had, again, for 30 years, really up until the escalation of Vietnam in 66. That, to me, is what has to be done. Otherwise, we're doomed. Because if Biden wins, I can tell you this: in 2022, Republicans will take over, and they'll blow away in the House and the Senate, and we'll be back to square one. So. And there's plenty of history with that, with both Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Robert, thank you. Always great catching up. Safe travels back to Wisconsin. Enjoy NJ. And, again, if you can get a cheesesteak, go for it, my friend.
I'm going to Tom's River this weekend to see my uncle, so they might have him there. That's pretty close to Philadelphia.
There you go. I think you're right. All the best. Enjoy. That's Robert Craig. I'm Jeff Santos. Back in a flash.
Improve your reading, writing, and math skills, learn to speak English, earn a high school equivalency credential, or volunteer in an adult education program. Call today. It's the Massachusetts Adult Literacy Hotline. 1-800-447-8844. The line is available 7 days a week, 6 a.m. to midnight. They've got free information on adult secondary education, GED, high set prep, ESOL, reading, writing, math, and citizenship classes for adults offered throughout Massachusetts. There's also information online at mass.gov/edu/literacy hotline. The Massachusetts Adult Literacy Hotline is a World Education Incorporated project funded by the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. This message brought to you by your friends here at AM 1530, WVBF. Listen to the Silver City Meeting House with host Barry Sanders and Carol Doherty
every Saturday at their new time, 9 a.m., exclusively on AM 1530 WBBF.